Hand over the cash. Now, are you trying to watch me die right here on the tile? I'd barely pushed through the front door, December sleet still stinging my cheeks, when my mother charged at me like a woman possessed. Her voice was a raw, jagged thing, shaking with a fury that seemed to swallow the entire foyer. The laughter and clinking glasses from the living room died in an instant, replaced by a vacuum of quiet so absolute it hurt my ears. I was frozen, a deer in the headlights of my own family. Every single person, aunts, uncles, cousins, had swiveled to stare. Their faces were a blur of curiosity, smug judgment, and barely concealed glee. I felt like I'd been shoved onto a stage, naked under a spotlight, waiting for the audience to decide if I'd crumble or run. My mother's face was splotchy and red, her holiday lipstick smeared. Behind her, through the archway, I could see the feast. A gleaming ham, pots of creamy potato sausage, towers of pepparkakor cookies. All the traditions of our Swedish Minnesota Christmas, now a backdrop for my public execution. My Uncle Lars had a forkful of food frozen halfway to his mouth. My cousin Britta was whispering behind her hand. And my younger sister, Elin, stood by the fireplace, arms locked across her chest, shooting daggers at me with her eyes. "Mom, please just let me," I started, my throat closing up. "Don't you mom me, Clara," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "Your father and I are hemorrhaging money and you're hoarding a small fortune like some kind of miser." "Always been like that," a voice muttered from the dining table. I couldn't tell who. "Too good for us now that she's got her fancy job. Can't even help her own mother on Christmas Eve," another voice added, dripping with venom. My hands balled into fists inside my coat pockets. That old, familiar weight settled onto my shoulders, the crushing pressure I thought I'd escaped when I moved out. Elin was in trouble. My parents were drowning, and I was supposed to be the life raft, the one who always fixed everything. But not this time. It all started 3 months ago in late September. The leaves were turning, and we were at my parents' house in Edina for Sunday dinner. Over plates of rotmos and pickled herring, my dad cleared his throat, his eyes gleaming with a familiar salesman-like sparkle. He laid out his grand plan. "Your mother and I have a life-changing opportunity," he announced. "We're opening a restaurant, authentic Swedish cuisine just like Mormor used to make. From there, we parlay that success into a real estate portfolio. We have the connections. This will elevate the entire family." My mom nodded along, her blonde bob bouncing enthusiastically. "A family business. Can you imagine? Elin, sweetie, you must be so excited." Elin, 5 years younger than me at 26, was practically bouncing in her seat. "It sounds incredible. I'm all in." But my stomach was doing somersaults. I'd learned a long time ago to trust that churning feeling. "Can I take a look at the business plan?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "The contracts, the financial projections." Dad's smile tightened, just for a fraction of a second. "Don't you trust us, Clara?" "It's not about trust. It's about due diligence." He slid a thin folder across the table. I spent the next hour poring over it while Elin and Mom chattered about napkin folds and china patterns. The more I read, the louder the alarm bells screamed. There were vague, recurring fees labeled operational costs. A real estate venture with no listed properties. Financial projections that promised a 300% return in the first year, pure fantasy. And repeated references to a silent partner named Sven, but not a single detail about his background or qualifications. "Dad, who is this Sven guy exactly?" I asked. He waved a dismissive hand. "An old business associate, very well connected in the Twin Cities commercial real estate scene." "What's his track record? What properties has he actually developed?" "Clara, you're overanalyzing this," Dad snapped, his patience fraying. "Sometimes in life you have to take a leap of faith." "Not with my savings, you don't." "I'm sorry," I said quietly, closing the folder. "I can't invest in this. The numbers don't add up." I left that night knowing I'd crossed a line. In their eyes, I was no longer a daughter. I was the enemy. And now, on Christmas Eve, I was standing in the foyer, paying the price. "Give me the money," my mother screamed again, her voice raw. The Christmas music had been cut off. The only sound was the crackle of the fire and my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I felt the weight of a dozen pairs of eyes, judgmental, waiting for me to break. Mom, I need to understand what's going on first. Where's all this debt coming from? Where's it coming from? She laughed, a bitter, broken sound. The restaurant is failing, we owe everyone. And you, our own flesh and blood, won't lift a single finger. That's not fair, I whispered. I told you 3 months ago this was a bad investment. Oh, here we go, my Uncle Lars called out from the table. The big-shot financial analyst has an opinion. Some daughter, my Aunt Britta sniffed, letting her parents go under on Christmas. My face was on fire. My hands were shaking. Then Alin stormed across the room and got right in my face, her blue eyes, the exact shade of mine, blazing with a fury I'd never seen directed at me before. You are so selfish, she shouted, her voice trembling. You've always been selfish. I gave them everything, my entire savings. I even took out loans. But you won't give them a penny because you're too busy sitting on your high horse judging the rest of us. Her words hit me like physical blows. My little sister, the one I'd protected from bullies, helped with homework and talked through every heartbreak. She thought I was the villain. Alin, I warned you. You warned me about nothing, she screamed. You just looked down on us and walked away. I stepped up and did what family is supposed to do. My mother collapsed into a chair, sobbing dramatically. What did we do to deserve this? We gave you everything, Clara, everything. My dad put a hand on her shoulder, but his eyes were on me, cold, calculating. Your sister understood what family means. Why can't you? I scanned the room. Every face was a variation of disappointment or contempt. My cousin Anna looked away. My godmother, Greta, shook her head slowly. Only my 92-year-old farmer, confused by the commotion, reached out and patted my hand as I passed, whispering in Swedish, Sta stark, lilla vän, var T red. Stand strong, little one, don't be afraid. I grabbed the doorframe to steady myself. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. But I knew a truth they couldn't see. I wasn't being cruel by refusing. I was the only responsible person in that room. I was the villain who was actually trying to save them. The weeks after Christmas were a special kind of hell. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from relatives, each one a variation of the same theme: selfish, ungrateful, a disappointment. Alin blocked my number. When I drove to her apartment in Uptown, she wouldn't even open the door. I have nothing to say to you, she said through the chain lock, her voice hollow. You made your choice. Meanwhile, I started digging. The restaurant, Mormer's Table, had opened in October in a trendy St. Paul neighborhood. On Instagram, it looked charming. But when I drove by on a Thursday night, the place was a ghost town. I checked the business filings. They'd taken out a high-interest loan. I found the lease. They were paying double the market rate. The landlord's name? Sven Lindström, the mysterious partner. Then I found the real estate company paperwork. It was registered to a shell corporation called Nordic Ventures. No website, no track record, just a P.O. box in a strip mall in Bloomington. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a legitimate business. It was a setup, and my parents had walked right into it, dragging Alin with them. The calls from my mom continued. Your sister is suffering because of you, she'd scream one day. She's working double shifts, drowning in debt. The next day, she'd be sweet as pie. If you just help us out, we could all be a family again. The pressure was relentless. I'd wake up at 3 a.m., heart racing, wondering if I was the crazy one. But then I'd remember the vague contracts, the fake real estate deals, the way my dad's eyes slid away when I asked about Sven. I was utterly, profoundly alone. The enemy in my own family, cast out for the crime of asking questions. Then, one bleak afternoon in late January, I got a text from Alin. Just 2 words. I need you. I called immediately. No answer. I tried again and again. Voicemails, texts, nothing. A horrible dread settled in my bones. Something had broken. The whole carefully constructed lie was about to implode, and Alin was going to be crushed in the rubble. I showed up at my parents' house unannounced on a gray Saturday. Alin's car was in the driveway, along with another one I didn't recognize. I used my old key to let myself in. Angry voices drifted from the living room. I can't ask her for more money, Elaine was saying, her voice ragged. I have nothing left. You'll figure it out, my dad replied, his tone dismissive. I talked to the bank. They turned me down for another loan. I'm maxed out. I can barely make my own rent. I stepped into the doorway. All three of them froze and turned to stare at me. Mom, Dad, and Elaine. My sister's face was gaunt, with dark circles under her eyes. She looked like she'd aged 5 years in 3 months. What's going on? I asked quietly. Nothing that concerns you, my dad said coldly, since you're not part of this family anymore. I walked further into the room. Elaine texted me for help, so here I am. Elaine's eyes filled with tears. She opened her mouth, then closed it. The restaurant failed, my mom said flatly. The real estate deals fell through. We lost everything. How much? I asked, silence. How much does Elaine owe? $80,000, Elaine whispered, shaking. I put in 40 from my savings, took out a $40,000 personal loan. It's all gone. I felt like I'd been punched. $80,000. My sister's entire future incinerated. And the restaurant, I pressed. Closed last week, my dad muttered. What happened to the money? Where did it go? They exchanged a nervous glance. It was my mom who finally spoke, her voice hard. The market changed. Sven's deals didn't pan out. These things happen. That's not an explanation. That's an excuse. I pulled out my phone. I want to see the financial records, every transaction, now. Absolutely not, my dad snapped. You don't get to come in here and make demands. I do when my sister is drowning, I shouted, my control finally snapping. You did this to her. The least you can do is explain where her money went. Clara, you're the only one with savings left, my mom said, switching tactics in an instant, her voice going soft and pleading. You're the only one who can save your sister. Please, we're begging you. Show me the records. My dad's face went purple. Get out of my house. Not until I know what really happened. Get out. Elaine was sobbing now, her face in her hands. I wanted to go to her, but my dad was blocking my path, his hand on my arm, pulling me toward the door. I left, but not because he told me to. I left because I knew exactly what I had to do next. I was going to find out where the money really went. I spent the next 2 weeks becoming a detective in my own family's life. I started with public records, business filings, property transactions, court documents. Mormer's table had closed after just 11 weeks, leaving behind a trail of unpaid vendors. But the interesting part was the landlord, Sven Lindstrom. Turned out he was my dad's old college roommate from Gustavus Adolphus, not a real estate developer, not a successful businessman. Just an old friend, with a felony fraud conviction from 2015. I felt sick. Next, I tracked down a former line cook from the restaurant, a guy named David. It was weird from the start, he told me over coffee. The owners were never there. When they did show up, they'd pull cash from the register for expenses. But we were always short on basic supplies, butter, flour. Then your dad would show up wearing a new watch. My hands were shaking. Did you ever meet Sven? Yeah, a few times. Sketchy dude, always in expensive suits but drove a beat-up car. He and your dad would go into the office and close the door. I heard the word gambling more than once. The word hit me like ice water. Gambling. I kept digging. Bank records were harder, but Elaine had signed power of attorney to our parents for the joint business venture, which meant they had access to her accounts. I convinced her to meet me just once. She looked terrible, exhausted, defeated. I need you to request your bank statements, I told her gently. For the last 6 months. Why? What does it matter? Because I think there's more to the story than they're telling us. She finally agreed. 3 days later, we sat in my apartment going through the transactions. $40,000 from her savings had been withdrawn in October. That matched. But then there were others. Smaller amounts. $10,000 in November. $15,000 in December. Another $8,000 in January. I didn't authorize these, Elaine whispered, her face going white. Do you recognize the recipients? She shook her head, scrolling. Most were wire transfers to unfamiliar accounts, but a few were checks made out to Nordic Ventures, the phantom company. And 2 large transfers went directly to Sven Lindström's personal account. They stole from you, I said quietly. Mom and Dad, they took your money and used it for something else. No, Elin said, but there was no conviction in her voice. No, they wouldn't. Elin, look at the evidence. She stared at the statements, tears rolling down her cheeks. Where did it go? She asked, her voice tiny. Where's my money? That's what I intend to find out. I went to my parents' house early on a Tuesday, a time I knew they'd both be home. This time, Elin walked beside me, her hands trembling as she gripped the bank statements, the evidence she had tried so long not to believe. My mom opened the door in her bathrobe, her face tightening the instant she saw us. I told you not to come back here, she snapped. I brushed past her. We're talking right now. My dad was at the kitchen table, the morning paper in front of him. He looked up with a sigh. What is it this time? I dropped the documents on the table, letting the pages fan out. Explain these. Explain why you withdrew over $70,000 from Elin's account without her consent, and tell us what happened to the money. He barely glanced at them. It went to the business. Don't lie to me, I said sharply. The business needed $40,000, no more. Where did the rest go? My dad didn't answer. My mom came up behind us, arms crossed. Money that stays in a family isn't something to fight about. You're the ones making this ugly. You did that yourselves, I shouted, my voice cracking. You drained her account, you ruined her credit, you left her drowning in debt, and you're acting like it's a minor inconvenience. We had expenses, my dad replied with infuriating calm. The restaurant needed upgrades. Sven needed capital for his opportunities. Sven is a convicted fraudster, I shot back. There were no real estate deals. There never were. My dad's jaw tightened, but he still tried to wave me off. I know about the gambling, I said. The words hung in the air. I talked to David, the line cook. I know Sven runs an illegal poker ring. I know you've been going there for months. So tell me, tell her. That's where the rest of the money went, isn't it? The room fell dead silent. My dad didn't flinch, but my mom's eyes flickered. Guilt, fear, recognition. A portion went to essential expenses, my dad finally said, his voice low. What we did with the rest isn't something you need to worry about. Not something I need to worry about, Elin whispered, her voice small and broken. You used my savings to gamble. I turned to my mom, searching for any ounce of remorse. Instead, she said with chilling coldness, we're your parents. We brought you into this world. You owe us. Elin inhaled sharply, like someone had struck her in the chest. When I looked at her, her face was a mix of shock, disbelief, and something shattering deep inside. You never cared, Elin said quietly. Not about the business, not about me, you just needed money, and I was convenient. Stop being dramatic, my dad muttered, picking up his paper again. Family supports each other. You two are too selfish to understand that. I watched as something in Elin shifted completely. The hope she'd clung to her whole life, the desperate longing for their approval, finally slipped away. For the first time, she saw them clearly, not as parents, but as people who had chosen themselves, every single time. Elin stood rooted to the floor, staring at them with a look that made it clear she no longer recognized them. It was as if she'd been speaking to strangers who were only pretending to be her family. She turned to me, her voice faint. Why didn't you tell me? My stomach clenched. I tried, Elin. You never wanted to hear it. She shook her head slowly. No, not about the money. Why didn't you tell me they were like this? That this is who they've always been? The question hit me hard. I glanced at our parents. My mom obsessively wiping an already spotless counter. My dad hiding behind his newspaper. They didn't react, didn't apologize, didn't even acknowledge the destruction they'd caused. I didn't know how, I said quietly. I kept doubting myself. I wondered if I was being too dramatic, too paranoid. I thought maybe if I just stopped asking questions, stopped pushing back, they'd finally love me the way I needed. Elin let out a brittle laugh. Hopping they'd love you if you didn't make trouble, she swallowed. Yeah, I believed that too. Her legs buckled and she sank into a chair. I moved beside her and took her hand. It was ice cold. $80,000, she whispered, as if the number itself could crush her. I gave them everything. I worked every overtime shift. I lived on ramen. I dropped my health insurance because I couldn't afford it. And I did it all because they promised we were building a future together, a legacy. Her voice fractured. And all the while they were spending it on gambling, on whatever they wanted. She looked helplessly at our parents, who still refused to meet our eyes. And I believed them. I believed every word because they were my mom and dad. You weren't wrong to trust them, I told her. You were a daughter. Daughters aren't supposed to expect betrayal. But you didn't trust them, she said. I learned not to, I said softly. A long time ago. She studied me then with new understanding, like she was finally piecing together years of moments she had misinterpreted. All those times you stayed away, all the Christmas mornings you left early, all the dinners you avoided. Her voice was filled with dawning realization. You weren't being distant, you were surviving. Tears streamed down her cheeks. I thought you were selfish. I thought you were cold and ungrateful, but you were the only one who saw them clearly. Behind us, my mom scoffed loudly. Oh, for heaven's sake, you two are being ridiculous. Be quiet, Elin said. Her voice was low but edged with steel. My mom actually recoiled. Elin stood, still holding my hand. We're done here, we're leaving. Elin, sweetie, my mom tried, her tone suddenly sugary. I said we're leaving, Elin repeated, her voice firm, unwavering. And we're not coming back. My dad finally lowered his paper, staring at her as if she were speaking a foreign language. You don't actually mean that. She met his gaze without flinching. I mean every word. Together, we walked out of that house, leaving our parents frozen in stunned silence behind us. We sat in my car in the driveway for a long time, neither of us ready to move or speak. The air was heavy with everything that had just happened. Snowflakes drifted down, settling on the windshield like a soft veil, blurring the world outside. It made the inside of the car feel strangely still, like time itself had paused to let us breathe. Eventually, Elin broke the silence. What am I supposed to do now? I exhaled slowly. We figure it out together, step by step. And over the next several weeks, that became our mission. We started by helping her move out of her overpriced uptown apartment and into a small, affordable place in a quieter neighborhood. It wasn't glamorous, but it was warm and safe and hers. From there, we sat down with her bills, every statement, every overdue notice, every letter that made her stomach twist. We entered everything into a spreadsheet, color-coded it, categorized it, sorted it by urgency. The chaos that had seemed impossible became something we could approach one line at a time. The worst was the personal loan, $40,000 with an 18% interest rate. It was suffocating. We reached out to a nonprofit credit counseling service, and with their help, she negotiated a lower rate and got on a structured repayment plan. It would still take years, 5, according to the calculations. But it was no longer an impossible burden. Her credit cards were consolidated. Her car was refinanced. Piece by piece, we dismantled the mountain of debt and rebuilt it into something she could actually climb without collapsing. I offered to help financially. I would have given her anything she needed, but she refused every time. No, she insisted gently. I need to do this on my own terms. I got trapped because I trusted the wrong people without thinking. I need to fix it by trusting myself for once. I didn't argue. I admired her resolve more than she knew. Meanwhile, our parents spiraled. My mom flooded our phones with tearful voicemails, insisting we were destroying the family. My dad switched between angry threats and guilt trips. At one point, my Aunt Britta called to scold me, claiming I was poisoning Elin against them. We blocked every number. One night, as we sat on my couch surrounded by receipts and half-eaten Thai food, Elin suddenly asked, "Is it supposed to hurt this much? Cutting them off?" Yeah, I admitted quietly. Because even when they fail you, they're still your parents. Some part of you keeps hoping they'll change, that they'll finally love you the way you needed. Her shoulders slumped. But they won't. No, I said softly. They won't. Elin stirred her noodles without eating. I keep replaying everything. All the years I wasted trying to win them over. All the times I judged you because I thought you weren't trying hard enough. All the ways I defended them while they were hurting you. You didn't understand, I told her. I should have, she whispered, eyes glossy. I should have trusted you. I'm so sorry, Clara, for everything I said, for every time I chose them over you. I reached across the table and closed my hand around hers. You don't owe me an apology. They conditioned us both to feel responsible for their feelings. They're experts at manipulation. They've had decades to perfect it. She sniffed. Still, I see the truth now. And you trust me now, I said. That's what counts. For a while, we just sat together, the room warm and still. Then Elin said something that made my chest ache in the best way. For the first time ever, I feel like I can breathe. Like I don't have to shrink myself, or prove anything, or apologize just for being alive. I smiled. That's what freedom feels like. She smiled back, small, tentative, but real. I think I'm finally starting to like it. 6 months later, Elin and I were on my apartment balcony, watching the Minneapolis skyline glow under a summer sunset. Streaks of orange and gold stretched across the sky, reflecting off the glass buildings. The air was soft and humid, the kind of evening that makes everything feel slower, gentler. Elin swung her legs over the balcony rail and sighed, a contented exhale I hadn't heard from her in years. She'd gotten a promotion, better hours, a healthier salary, real respect from her coworkers. She'd made every payment on her restructured loan, right on schedule. For the first time, she was shaping a life she wanted, not one she'd been pressured into. I saw Mom at the grocery store yesterday, she said casually. Oh, I raised an eyebrow. What happened? She came up to me like she wanted to talk. Elin paused. I didn't say a word, I just walked away. She frowned in quiet confusion. And the weird part, it barely hurt, not like before. That's not weird, I told her gently. That's healing. She rested her head on my shoulder. Something soft and familiar I hadn't felt since we were children, hiding from thunderstorms. I figured something out, she murmured. You're the only real family I have. My eyes prickled with emotion. Elin. No, listen. She sat up and looked at me, her expression open and earnest. Mom and Dad, they're just people who happen to share my DNA. They raised me, yes. But that doesn't make them what family should be. You're the one who protected me even when I pushed you away. You're the one who helped me rebuild my life when everything fell apart. You're the one who kept showing up. You're my sister, I said. Showing up was the easiest part. But it isn't a guarantee, she insisted. People pretend that blood ties create loyalty, but that's not how it works. Having the same last name doesn't mean someone will choose you, or treat you with honesty, or care about your well-being more than they care about their own comfort. She gazed toward the city, where lights were beginning to sparkle like tiny stars. Sometimes the people you share a name with are just that people, nothing more. The truth of her words settled between us like a weight that was both painful and strangely freeing. Family, Elin continued, the real kind, is made of the people you trust, the ones who show up even when it's uncomfortable, the ones who don't take advantage of your vulnerability but help you stand back up. I let out a soft laugh. Since when did you become so wise? She gave me a wry smile, somewhere between losing $80,000 and gaining a sister. We fell into an easy silence, watching the daylight fade and fireflies flicker in the trees below, tiny sparks drifting through the dusk. I thought about everything that had brought us to this moment. The arguments, the heartbreak, the relentless unraveling of illusions we'd once clung to. I thought about all the years I spent feeling guilty for setting boundaries, for asking hard questions, for refusing to play along with the narrative our parents had forced on us. I wasn't guilty anymore. Elin's voice softened. Thank you for being stubborn, for being the one who questioned everything, for letting them paint you as the villain so you could be the one who saved me. I squeezed her fingers gently, always. Because that's what real family does. Not the family defined by birth certificates or shared DNA, but the family shaped through loyalty, honesty, respect, and deliberate choice. The family built by showing up when it matters, by protecting each other when no one else will. That's the kind of family worth keeping. The kind you create together, brick by brick, truth by truth. And that's the family we had become. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button for Winds of Thought and share it with someone who needs to hear it today.